Everybody, JC here with another T&I toy review. And for today's review, we're going to take a look at the new DC Collectibles 7-inch scale DC Universe animated movie Son of Batman figures. Now this line consists of 4 figures featuring characters from the recently released Son of Batman animated feature from Warner Brothers. It's a continuation of the Justice League War line of figures that DC Collectibles released a few weeks ago. You've got the same style of packaging. You've got a white card back. On the background, you've got some images from the Son of Batman movie along with the logo. And because this is a Batman-themed wave, we also have that Batman 75th anniversary logo on there. The figure's clearly displayed so you can see what you're getting. And then we have the DC Universe animated movie Son of Batman logo down below. And then off to the side, the name of the character and a number depicting which figure in the series it is. On the card back, and it's the same for all 4 figures in the line, we have a look at the figures. Number 7 is Batman, number 8 is Damian Robin, number 9 is Nightwing, and number 10 is Deathstrok. Okay, so let's get these figures open and take a look at what's inside. Okay, so here's a look at the figures outside of the packaging. Now the first thing you may be noticing is that Batman is missing here. Now the reason why that is because my comic book store for some reason did not get Batman in this week. They said there was an error with their shipping and they got extra Deathstrokes instead of Batman. I don't know if that error was specifically related to them or if no comic book store got Batman in this week. You may want to call ahead to your comic book store if that's the figure you're specifically looking for, and make sure they did get it in. It was supposed to ship this week, but as I mentioned, my store did not get it in. So for the purposes of this review, we'll just be looking at Deathstrok, Robin, and Nightwing. I'll try and maybe review Batman next week when my shop gets it in, if you all want. So we'll take a quick look at each of the figures. The overall design as far as sculpting, paint apps, and articulation are pretty similar with all these figures. Obviously Robin's a little bit shorter because, scale-wise, Robin is a kid as opposed to Nightwing and Deathstrok, which are the adults. But articulation and everything are pretty similar, but we'll go over all of that for all 3 figures real quick here. So we'll start off looking at Nightwing, and this is probably my least favorite of the 3 figures. The detail is probably the weakest in my opinion, and it just comes off as a little bland and boring. I mean, for the most part, it is true to what we saw in the animated movie, so I can't really fault it. It's just we've had Nightwing figures released previously. We've got the Greg Capullo, and we've got the upcoming New 52 version. And so this one, to me, is just a little bit more on the boring side. But again, if you are collecting the animated movie line, then you'll definitely probably want to get this one just to complete your collection of those figures. And like with the previous Justice League War figures, we've got pretty simple paint apps. Basically, we've got a light gray for most of the costume. We've got a little bit even lighter gray up at the top parts and his arms. The blue bird is painted on there, and then as well as the line work throughout the costume is all painted on there as opposed to sculpted. He does have some pouches on his sides that are basically glued onto the figure, and then the rest of the belt is kind of painted on there. The paint apps for this figure overall are pretty solid. I don't have any significant paint errors. There's a little bit of a scratch mark on his hair where the paint chipped a little bit, but otherwise, for the most part, the paint apps are pretty good. He comes with his bow staves for accessories, but he has no place to hold them other than his hands, but he doesn't have like a place on his back to hold them like we've seen with some of the previous figures. And they're just little black pieces of plastic. The skin tones are a little bit on the orangey side. Not great, but not horrible either. He's got the mask, which again is painted on there, and then his lips are a little bit on the orange side as well. But overall, I think the face sculpt looks pretty good. And then he's kind of got that longer hair sculpted on and kind of the rough edges like you see in the cartoon. So, again, this looks pretty true to what we saw in the cartoon. Deathstrok, again, same kind of design work with the paint apps. A lot of the details are just painted on there, such as the belts for his holster, and then on his waist. Again, like with Nightwing, he's got some pouches that are basically sculpted on or separate pieces that were glued onto the sides. He's also got this thing on his chest, which I think is supposed to be maybe a magazine or something. There's no real detail on it. It's just kind of a black rectangle piece that's been glued to his chest. He does have like the clips for his chest armor are sculpted on the figure, but then the rest of the line work and everything is basically just painted on. He's got the holster on the one side with a gun in it, but the gun is not removable. And then he does have a sheath on the back that holds two swords, and the sheath is not removable, but the swords are removable. And they both look the same, black handles with silver metallic type paint. And they fit nice and tightly in the sheath, and he can hold both swords in his hands, and he holds them pretty good. And the paint job on this figure, for the most part, is pretty good. There are some on my figure, some paint speckles, some orange paint on the black side, and then on the orange side there's some black speckles of black paint. So a little bit of sloppiness there, and then a little bit on the line work on his pouches. Seems a little bit on the sloppy side. Not terrible or anything, but just a little, the lines are a little off to me on those pouches. But overall, again, this figure is in that animated design like we've seen with the other figures from this and the Justice League War line. So I think it fits in nicely with that. Overall, based on, compared to the other Deathstrok figures that we've recently gotten from DC Collectibles, we've gotten the one based on the Arrow TV series, and we've gotten the one based on the Arkham Origins figure, which is, again, one of DC Collectibles' best figures to date. This one is probably my least favorite of the Deathstrokes we've seen recently. But again, if you're a fan of that animated look and everything, then I think you'll definitely want to pick this one up. Oh, and then he's also got some tassels on the back of his head, which are just kind of a vinyl type material. So finally we have the Damian Robin, and this is probably my favorite figure in the line to date, and that's primarily because this is the first time we've gotten Damian in figure form from DC Collectibles, and I really like the detail on the figure. I think the paint apps are very strong. There's really no noticeable paint errors on this figure. Again, like with the others, most of the line work, the buttons on his costume, the R, they're all just painted on there. Again, he has pouches on the side, which are separate pieces that are glued on, but then the front part of the belt is glued on. The bottom part of his red tunic is that soft kind of vinyl material, so you've got some flexibility there. And then his cape as well is also that kind of flexible vinyl material. And he has some detail painted on the underside of the, under the cape as well, which is nice. He's got the little hook things on his gloves. And then he's got the wrist guards, which are sculpted onto his lower arm as well, which is nice. The overall, face sculpt on this figure I think is pretty solid. It looks very true to the Damian character, in my opinion, both from the comic and the cartoon. Paint apps for the figure, as I said, are pretty solid, and you've got the red on the tunic, you've got black on the upper part of the cape, and then the yellow, which stands out nicely. The pants are basically a very dark gray, and then you've got a little bit of light gray here at the knee area, and then you've got for the guards on his ankles and wrists basically are green with some black line work in it. So again, I think this is a figure that will fit in nicely with the animated line, but I also think this figure fits in well with your regular New 52 figures as well. So if you want to put this with your Greg Capullo Batman or with your Red Hood and Robin and Nightwing figures from the New 52 line, I think this figure will fit in pretty nicely. He comes with one accessory. He comes with a sword, which is we saw him use in the cartoon, the animated movie, the Son of Batman movie. So that, and it's again just like with Deathstrokes, it's just a sword with a black handle. It's got a little gold trim on the handle, and then silver metallic paint. And it's a hard plastic for the most part. A little flexibility, but it doesn't seem to warp much, so you don't have to worry about that. And it's pretty pointy at the tip. And he'll hold it in his right hand only. So Nightwing stands just a little bit under 7 inches, and same with Deathstrok. They're pretty close to about the same height, Nightwing and Deathstrok. And then Robin comes in at about 5 inches. So the scale overall for this line is pretty good. Again, I think the figures will fit in nicely with your regular New 52 DC Collectible figures, as well as the animated line. And of course, this is where you're going to get your Batman to round out your Justice League team. If you collected the Justice League War figures, then you'll probably definitely want to pick up Batman just to round out your Justice League team. Articulation on these figures are pretty much the same across the board and similar to what we saw with those Justice League War figures. Now I will note that Robin here does not have bicep swivels, whereas Nightwing and Deathstrok do, but otherwise the articulation is pretty much the same. And then the only other thing I want to notate is Robin's ability to do like the splits is a little bit limited because of how his shirt comes down over his legs. So that's about as much as he can do the splits. But otherwise the figures and the articulation are pretty much the same. So for the head, you can look left and right, and Nightwing has a little bit of down movement, not much in the way of up movement. Same with Deathstrok. Robin's head is basically has very little up or down movement at all. And in fact, that's probably the most annoying thing about the Robin figure is he's kind of stuck in this almost looking down pose, so you can't have him look up at all, really. That's really my only flaw with the Robin figure. The arms are attached with their standard ball hinge joints, so they can get their arms out about that much. They have good rotation. As I said, Nightwing and Deathstrok both have bicep swivels, single hinged elbows, so they can bend their elbows about that much. Oh, and one other quick thing, they also have at the elbows you can rotate on all three figures, and then there's no wrist articulation on these figures. No midsection articulation either. The legs are on ball joints, so you can get splits out. Again, Robin's a little bit limited in that area because of his tunic. You can get the legs forward, backwards, single hinged knee, so they can bend their knees about that much. And then there's no ankle articulation on these figures, and they have peg holes on both of their feet. That's my review. Overall, you know, like I said, if you've been collecting this animated line, the Justice League War figures, then you pretty much know what to expect from these figures. And obviously, if you've been collecting those, then you'll probably want to add these to your collection as well, especially that Batman figure if you want to round out your Justice League team. The Robin figure, I think, you know, might be worth picking up even if you haven't really been collecting the animated series line in itself. Is a nice figure that I think will fill in your Damian spot on your New 52 team. So like if you've been collecting the regular New 52 figures, I think the Damian Robin figure will be a nice addition to those as well. These figures are hitting comic book and specialty shops now, at least all but Batman. Again, you may want to check with your store to see if they got Batman in this week or not. My store did not. But you know, definitely if you want to add these to your collection, start checking your favorite store. And that's my review. Please leave a comment. Let us know what you think. If you're so inclined, please like the video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. And until next time, I'll check you later.